So thank you everyone for joining.
Perfect.
This is our first talk of this season, and I'm pleased to say that our first speaker is from South America. We have had quite a few people from Latin America, but none of them is actually based in Latin America. So this is the first person speaking who is from Latin Americans in Buenos Aires as well. So this is Professor Diego Arbo. He obtained his PhD at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. And as a postdoc, he worked on highly excited Rydberg atoms in the Oak Ridge National Lab at the University of Tennessee in the US with Carlos Reinhold, and on Attosecond physics in the Vienna University of Technology in Austria with Joachim Burgdorfer. And then Diego returned to Argentina and nowadays is a professor at UBA and a researcher at the Argentine Technical and Scientific Research National Council in the Institute for Astronomy and Space Physics. Diego's interests and current work are attosecond time delays, photonization beyond the dipole approximation, ionization from the electric surfaces, among others. And we are very pleased to have you here today. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And he's going to talk about attosecond time delays by interference of multiphoton transitions. So we are ready to go.
So thank you, Carla, for the presentation and for the invitation. And I want to congratulate you for these seminars. I mean, this set of seminars, the Atto Fridays, they are very useful, very interesting, and I enjoyed them very much. And also congratulate, I mean, this is one outcome from the quantum battles that started during the pandemic, I think. So congratulations and thank you for the presentation. So, okay, so in order to start to introduce my talk, I will travel in time, back in time to 1905. And you know, this was Annus Mirabilis in Latin, that means wonderful year or miraculous year for physics. I mean, they are the guy here on the right of the picture wrote 3 papers that year. The last one was about the special theory of relativity. The second one was about the quantum Brownian motion. And the first one was the explanation of the photoelectric effect. So I want to focus on this one. So he did an spectroscopy energy domain theory about the photoelectric effect. And he introduced the incipient concept of the light quanta, or quantum here, or photon, where the energy of each photon was proportional to the frequency of the electromagnetic radiation. The proportionality constant was named after the guy on the left of the same picture. So, and one question naturally arises from this study. Does the photoelectric effect happen instantaneously, or what is the same? Is there any finite time the electronic wave packet need to be formed? So, of course, at those times, and for many years, this process was considered instantaneously. But since this century, with the advent of this century, we could start to answer this type of fundamental questions and to perform some time of chronoscopic theory or time domain study of this. That's why this came with the advent of the ultra-fast lasers and the Attosecond physics. So in this talk, what I will propose is to perform a time-dependent study in order to have a thorough understanding of the atomic photoionization. So this is the outline of my talk. In the beginning, I will set the basics for the theory of laser-assisted photoionization emission. Then I will start with to review the Rabbit protocol in order to measure the phase delays, but from a time-dependent standpoint. As we try to measure time, we want to, or I want to perform some time-dependent study of it. And at the end of the talk, I will change a little bit the setup as I mean, going to a rabbit-like setup where we have a two-color ionization by the omega to omega field. I mean, one fundamental and the second harmonic in order to get the time delays. So let's start with the first part. So of course, I mean, now we are dealing with a two-color field. The probe, it's a fundamental field, and the pump is given by the high harmonic. And the high harmonic, or the very high frequency field, is generated by high harmonic generation. And this happened, I mean, I was proved in IT in 87 by Anne Lullier. And briefly, I mean, when one laser is focused on a target gas, part of the laser energy is transformed to high harmonics. And then when they are filtered out, and then these harmonics are impinging or are illuminating another detection gas, then they produce photoelectrons. So here, what I show is the energy or harmonic order spectrum for both the radiation and the photoelectrons. And the photoelectrons are a replica of the radiation. And you see several peaks at odd harmonic orders. So this corresponds to the frequency or energy domain. If we want to see the time domain, so this photoelectron spectrum is transformed to a train of attosecond pulses. And the train of attosecond pulses, we know that we are first reproduce and measure the duration of each attosecond pulse was measured by Pierre Agostini in 2001, and then Ferenckrauss managed to isolate one single attosecond pulse the same year in the Vienna University of Technology. So with this high harmonic and assisted with the fundamental harmonic, we can try a kind of pump probe experiment. So we have the XUV pulse playing the role of the pump, and the infrared or near infrared pulse playing the role of the probe. So when the duration of the pump of the XUV is less or much less than the period of the probe, we are in the streaking regime. Instead, when the duration of the pulse is higher than the duration of the optical pulse, we are in the sideband regimes. So in this talk, we will deal with the second regime, with the sideband regime. So we will start seeing the formation of the sideband. So in order to do that, we try a semi-classical model. It's a very simple model in order to have an understanding what is happening here. I mean, about the physical processes. So the ionization amplitude is given by this expression, and this is the ionization amplitude for one initial state, atomic state, and one final state, and this finite channel corresponds to the distorted wave. So within the strong field approximation, we can get this expression, and where we have used the rotating wave approximation in order to cope with the XUV pulse. Here, D corresponds to the dipole element, and S corresponds to the generalized classical action. So after some algebra, the momentum distribution, that is the square of the transition amplitude, can be written as the equation of the diffraction grating in the time domain. What does it mean? That it can be split in two different factors. The first one corresponding to the intracycle interference, I mean the interference of the wave packet released during only one pulse of the infrared laser. and the intercycle factor corresponded to the interference of the different cycles involved in the attosecond pulse train. So the intercycle factor will lead us to the position of the sidebands corresponding to the absorption of one XUV photon. We are in the first order perturbation for the XUV photon, but for the exchange of multiple number of infrared photons. IP is the ionization potential, and UP is the ponderomotive energy. So this corresponds to the intercycle interference. Let's go now to the intracycle interference. This factor F that we see here. This factor F inherits this time integral. And this time integral can be calculated approximately using the saddle point approximation, and gives this expression that is essentially the superposition or the addition of all the classical trajectories released at a certain time, Ts, at and a final momentum K. This time Ts should fulfill the saddle equation, which is no more than the equation of the circle for this simple setup. So this equation of the circle is in the momentum map. Kz is along the direction of polarization, and K perpendicular is the perpendicular direction. So when, and this circle here in this scheme corresponds to the main ionization line of the XUV in absence of the infrared laser. So this means when the vector potential A here is 0. So we have this circle. So as the vector potential is an oscillating function, so we will have this oscillating saddle solutions. So the areas covered here are directly given by the color area in this scheme. This is in the momentum distribution, and if you see it in the energy and angle distribution, you will have this this scheme. This is only a transformation of coordinates from one to the other. So let's go back to the intracycle interference pattern. So along the polarization direction, in this direction, has this very simple expression. Given, I mean, and this is the same expression at the double slit experiment, because we will have two different saddle solutions in this region. So the contribution of these two saddle solutions will work as two different slits. So it's not surprising that we get the same expression as the Young solution. So here, delta S corresponds to the accumulated action between the two release times within the same optical cycle. And when and this is along the direction of polarization for different angles. You have also a very more complicated but still analytical expression for the intracycle interference. You can go to the paper in order to check this expression if you want. So what's the results? I mean, when doing all these kind of things. Okay, here I show the results in the energy, the abscissa, and the ordinate is the angle of the different distributions. The first row corresponds to the semi-classical model that I have just explained in the previous slides. This is the strong field approximation. What does it mean? That we are doing this time integral numerically with no approximation using the saddle point approximation. And this is the result calculated using the ab initio time-dependent Schrödinger equation. So the left column corresponds to a higher intensity, and the right column corresponds to a lower intensity. That's why it is more compacted, the distribution. So what you can observe here are different, I don't know if the resolution of the screen can show it, very thin stripes, vertical stripes, corresponding to the intercycle interference. They are nothing more than the sidebands. So we are observing here the formation of the sidebands. And the separation of the sideband corresponds to the photon energy of the infrared laser. These vertical sidebands are modulated by the intracycle interference, as you can observe here or here. And we observe a very good agreement between all the calculations, which tells us that we are in very safe land in order to perform some analysis, okay, in order to have a thorough insight about the problem using the semi-classical model. Okay, so then in collaboration with some experimentalists in Max Born Institute, Mark Brakin and Oleg Kornilov, their group, we performed some experimental and theoretical study about the ionization or XUV ionization of argon assisted by infrared laser. And these are the parameters that were used. And they observe in the experiment this result. So what they observe is the following. They see these vertical stripes, and they correspond to the sidebands, but they don't have any trace in their measurements about the intracycle interference. And they claimed that it was related to the process of the averaging over the focal volume of the laser pulse. So as there's some kind of integral for the different intensities that happened into the focus, so this kind of process blurred or washed out this intracycle interference. So in order to check that, I performed the TDSC calculations. And even though for one single intensity, we observe all these two interferences, both intercycle sidebands and intracycle, as I have shown in the last slide. So I observe the same pattern. I mean, I see the sidebands, but not the intracycle pattern. So with this, they had, I mean, experimentalists had, in my opinion, a wonderful idea for its simplicity. So they say the following. As the process of the focal volume is more or less like an integration over intensity, so they measure two different momentum distribution for slightly different peak intensities, and they subtracted one from the other. So this is a process very similar to the differentiation. So in doing that, they said, okay, maybe we can get this, or we can recover this kind of intracycle interference. They did this, and they obtained this result, I mean, for the measurement. They measure this. And they observe these stripes, and now they are not vertical at all. So they claim, okay, are they real intracycle interference pattern? Okay, so I did the same kind of calculations, mimicking the experiment, and I obtained something very similar to them. So, and now, okay, but are these real intracycle patterns? Okay, for me, it's very simple. I perform the calculation for a single intensity, the peak intensity of the experiments and the calculations, And then what I do is just to do the calculations uh, for a pump or for the XUV pulse duration equal to the period of the laser. So there, they will not have any chance to have intercycle, only intracycle. And what I obtain is this. So you see a very complete agreement despite the different color scale that I used here. But you see the same stripes here, that these are, there's no any doubt that they are coming only from intracycle interference. So this here corresponds to this here. Here there's a middle one. Here there's a middle one, and here there's a left one and a left one. So we see a complete agreement. And okay, so in the paper, we show the community that this is a good procedure in order to retrieve intracycle interference in when you have laser-assisted photoionization emission. So now, Houston, we are in trouble because the following. I mean, if we use a quasi-monochromatic pump pulse, and we are neglecting, of course, any border effect, I mean, some switch on and switch off of the pump laser, we, we can produce this kind of scheme. So if we want to shift one pulse with respect to the other with a relative phase phi, there's a translation invariance in time here. So the outcome of this, the calculations and the measurements, when we are in these suppositions that, we are neglecting these border effects, there shouldn't be any trace of the relative phase. Okay, so this kind of experiments are not good in order to get some function or some outcome as a function of the relative phase. That's why we go to the second part of the talk. I mean, the rabbit, in order to get some time-dependent theory of rabbit, to the rabbit protocol. So we have to replace the quasi-monochromatic pump pulse with a train of attosecond pulses. So when you have a train of attosecond pulses, like here, you are breaking this invariance in the time domain, this translational invariance in the time domain, because you can set here is zero at any point, for example, at the maximum of the pulse. So the outcome will have, the outcome will be a function of the relative phase phi. Will depend on the relative phase phi, and this is the philosophy of the Rabbit protocol. Rabbit is the reconstruction of attosecond harmonic breathing by interference of two photon transitions. So I highlight the two photon transitions because what I will discuss later. The two photons come from this kind of scheme. Here, this works like an interferometer. This leg corresponds to the absorption of one harmonic photon and the absorption of one photon of the near infrared. And the other leg corresponds to the absorption of one photon of the neighboring harmonic here, and then the emission of the photon of the near infrared. They go to the same final state. So when you vary the relative phase, you will get this kind of oscillating pattern. This is the philosophy of the Rabbit protocol, which works as a quantum clock in this way because you have interference. This is in contrast to streaking, because streaking works as a classical clock. But I will not discuss about that. So Now the goal is to determine the photoionization phase or time delays. And in order to do that, we use the same theory, but now we restrict, for the when we have the electric field of two harmonics, two neighboring harmonics, and in presence of the fundamental laser of frequency omega. So the momentum distribution is the coherent superposition of the contributions of the two different harmonics, of the ionization due to the two different harmonics. So in the same way as we did before, I will not show, but it's the same philosophy, the same thing, we can split the momentum distribution or factorize the momentum distribution in the intercycle factor and the intracycle factor. The intercycle factor, again, is responsible for the position of the energy peaks corresponding to the absorption of one photon of the harmonic and the exchange of n photons of the fundamental laser. So if we restrict exactly to the position of this energy, we can write each of these momentum distributions in this way. This here, each contribution will be proportional to a phase involving the group delay of the harmonic, a phase here corresponding to the phase delay between the two, the train of pulses and the fundamental field, and one constant, which is a function that I will discuss a little bit later. So when you include this here, due to the intracycle interference, this momentum distribution can be written in this way, as everybody working in Rabbit knows, where A and B are some constants, which depends exactly if we are looking at which energy. And here delta corresponds to the phase delay, what is called the phase delay, that is the goal to measure in the Rabbit protocol. This phase delay is related to two different contributions. The first one corresponds to the contribution of the phase delay of each harmonic, and the second one to the atomic phase delay, that is the photoionization process. So with this, I can show some results for ionization from, very simple, from the fundamental state of the hydrogen atom. And we perform calculations within the semi-classical model in the first row, the strong field approximation, the second row, and the TDSE in the third row. You observe here, the left column, the intracycle interference pattern, and for 3 cycles, this is the combination of the intercycle and intracycle, and the sideband, the main sideband between the two harmonics are here denoted with a dashed line, and these are the two harmonics, the lower harmonic and the upper harmonic, and the other are marginal sidebands. So you observe here that in all the calculations, irrespective of the calculations, they peak, the main sideband peak at relative phase equal to 0 and pi, and they correspond to phase delay equal to 0. In the semi-classical model, there are some things that I want to point out, not because they are important, in order to mention their non-importance, and they are this wavy pattern here, and these are discontinuities that appear in the semi-classical model. This is an artifact of the theory, and another artifact of the theory are these lines, they are caustics, coming from the semi-classical model. Any semi-classical model have caustics, and they are here. Of course, these artifacts are removed in the strong field approximation, TDSC calculation, because they are quantum calculation, there's a width, a broad width of the wave packet. So the main result here is that the harmonic and the main sideband are in opposition of phase for this intensity, this low intensity. The same for a higher intensity of the probe laser. And we observe more or less the same, but the main difference is the following. Both sidebands and harmonics, and also the marginal sidebands are in, or they are all in phase, okay? And these are different from the low intensity when they are in opposition of phase. And we want to explain this. Why does it happen this? So in order to do that, what we do is just to focus on the sideband on the first row, the lower harmonic on the second row, and the higher harmonic on the last row. And we do it within the semi-classical model, the left column, and the strong field approximation on the right column. So we observe that for the vast majority of the peak field or intensity of the probe field, all the sidebands and harmonics are in phase. But there's something very strange happening for very low intensities. So what I will show now is a close-up of the same figure. So we see that doing a close-up, there is a variation, whereas the sidebands all are peaking at relative phase equals 0 and pi, the harmonics are peaking for low intensity at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, which corresponds to phase delay equal to pi. But there's a transition of behavior here, about 0.004 of the peak field. This is about 6 times 10 to the 12 watts per square centimeter of the probe field. There's a change of behavior here. So, and we observe this not only in the semi-classical model, but in the strong field approximation, which happened to be very close to the TDSC, as I showed before. So now, how we explain this change of behavior? Why is this change of behavior? Depending on the intensity of the probe field. So we, excuse me, I will go back a little bit here. We now analyze this factor here as a function of the laser intensity of the probe. So here, this is this row is for the sideband. We see that both are more or less the same, so they are in phase, in complete phase, or almost complete phase for the whole range of intensity here. But what happens when we deal here with the upper harmonic, that it happens more or less the same for the whole range of intensity, but there's a crucial difference. In the low intensity, they are in opposition of phase. So if they are in opposition of phase, there's a jump of pi in the relative phase. And this is the explanation why at a certain intensity corresponding to a peak field to equal to 0.004, there's a change of behavior. And this happens the same for the other harmonic. At more or less the same peak field or intensity, there's this change of behavior. So now, why does it happen? Okay, because this was in principle unexpected by the first order perturbation theory of the Rabbit protocol. And the first order perturbation theory takes into account only the left diagrams. Okay, so this corresponds to to the diagram that I have shown a couple of slides before. And these are the lowest order for the harmonics. But then we have to deal with higher order transitions, not only two photon transitions, but to higher number of photon transition, multi-photon transition. And that's why is the title of my talk. So this change of behavior happens because as the intensity of the laser field is increased, there are entering uh, other terms in this kind of perturbative analysis that I'm doing now. So our study is not is not a perturbative analysis. So our analysis takes into account the whole series of this transition amplitude. So takes into account the uh, all the possible diagrams. So with this, we go to the last of my of the topics covered in this talk, and this is ionization given by the omega to omega field. So we are going back to a two-color field as in the first part of the talk, but now they have commensurate frequencies. I mean, one frequency is a harmonic of the other, but not a high harmonic. It's a small harmonic. In this case, is the second harmonic of the first one. So why did we study this? Because we saw one experiment performed by Philip Buxbaum at Stanford, and they tried to mimic what was studied for rabbit, but with this omega to omega setup. So we have the frequency of the fundamental, the frequency of the second harmonic, and the fundamental is a perturbation at some point. Is the intensity of the second harmonic of the fundamental is much less than the intensity of the second harmonic. So they wanted to have this scheme similar to rabbit. The first leg of this interferometer corresponds to the absorption of n plus 1 photons of the second harmonic, and then the emission of one harmonic of the probe, and the right leg corresponds to n to the absorption of the photons of the pump and one photon of the probe. So they get the same final result and expected to have some oscillating pattern as a function of the relative phase between the two colors. So here I show the vector potential and the electric field for the same laser intensities as in the experiment. And we observe that there are some oscillations, and we have some unit cell because the periodicity of the field is omega. I mean, is the period of the fundamental laser and not the period of the harmonic. So that's why there are two oscillations here. So here in dashed line, I show only the field of the second harmonic without the fundamental, and in full solid line, the other one. And here in this shaded area, you see the unit cell, I mean, one period of the laser. The one period, as I will show in the next slide, could be split in two different half periods, one here and the other here. And this kind of behavior changes as the relative phase changes. So the same as in the other two parts of the talk, the momentum distribution can be factorized in the intercycle pattern and the intracycle pattern. the intercycle interference gives rise to the formation of all the ATI peaks. In this case, we can call them, if you want, high harmonics and sidebands, but they are all ATI peaks. And the intracycle interference, after some algebra, of course, could be also split in two different contributions, corresponding to the contribution coming from one half cycle of the unit cell, as I showed in the previous slide. This is the intra-half cycle interference, and then the interference between the two half cycles. That's why, as there are two half cycles, again we get the Young formula, the Young expression for the double slit experiment. So, and here we show the interplay between the intercycle interference, non-interesting because they are not dependent on the relative phase. Of course, this expression does not is not a function of the relative phase because it's given by the conservation of energy, but the inter-half cycle, this factor here, has this wavy behavior. And the interplay or multiplication between the inter-half cycle and the intercycle end up in this pattern. And this pattern for low energies have like this very well-known chessboard pattern, but as the energy is increased, there are some changes. For example, the splitting of one peak is, I mean, you see a splitting, and this is much more complicated. And of course, this is along the polarization axis. I'm only studying here the emission along the polarization axis. So we performed the calculations for the semi-classical model or saddle point approximation, the strong field approximation, and TDSE, and we observed this wavy pattern given by the inter-half cycle interference in all these calculations. But there are some differences, not between the semi-classical model and the strong field approximation, but between the strong field approximation and the TDSE. Why? Because here you see that for very small energies, the strong field approximation peaks at here pi over 2, sorry, pi or 3 pi, or about the TDSE, they are shifted. Okay, and this shift, of course, this corresponds to the effect of the Coulomb potential on the wave packet of the photoelectrons, which is, of course, disregarded, not taken into account in both strong field approximation and semi-classical model. So here, in this paper, we showed that the momentum distribution can be thought of as a as a Fourier series, because we can have a Fourier series decomposition where the first term, you see, the first term corresponds to the rabbit-like protocol, okay? But there are other terms, higher order terms, that they are entering not only when the intensity is higher, but also when the energy is higher. The lowest order, I equal 1 here, phase delay will correspond to what we all know, the time delay given by this expression. Okay? This is the expression when you have a discrete differentiation. But as the intensity or the energy is increased, there are higher order terms entering. The left one corresponds to the scheme that I have just shown, but including only one photon of the probe field, and the difference here is one photon of the pump field. And I here, this index I corresponding to the Fourier analysis would correspond to the difference of the photons between the left and the right diagrams in the here. I mean, so so here not only one phase delay is necessary here, the first, but we have a full set of infinite number of sets corresponding to the problem. So we have to deal with this. So here we see only the first three, delta 1, delta 2, and delta 3 as a function of energy for the saddle point approximation in squares, the strong field approximation in triangles, and the color ones correspond to the TDSC. Can be harmonics or ATI and sidebands. And we observe this kind of trend, whereas the strong field or semi-classical model corresponds to 0 or pi or minus pi phase delay, the TDSC is radically different, and this is, of course, because of the effect of the Coulomb potential. And we see that whereas in the first order phase delay, there's a significant difference between the TDSC and the other calculations. In the second and third order, the TDSC calculation tends to the limit of the strong field approximation and semi-classical model, okay, in both. And what about the amplitudes of each of these phase delays, okay, of each component of the Fourier? We observe that for very low energy, the first order is very important, and the second and third order is not so important as the first order. So we are in safe land doing some kind of first order perturbative analysis. But when the energy increases, we are completely have to consider the other two orders, here and here, in all the calculation. Okay, so we all this, what we did, I mean, is to calculate the first order. Everybody does. They calculate the first order phase delay in order to get the results. And we compare with experiments given by the by Philip Baxbaum. And here, okay, we try, and I will not discuss it because we are almost in time, all the different definitions, but they agree very much with the experiment. The only thing that I want to highlight that in the experiment, what they did is they normalized the experiments in the paper. They normalized the experiment to the strong field approximation for the highest energy measure. But in our calculations, we see that this is not the case. I mean, because we are not going, I mean, our TDC calculation do not match the strong field calculation even at the higher energies calculated. So we rescaled the energy that the data from the experiment to the highest calculations, to the highest TDSC calculation. And in doing that, we get a very good agreement. So with that, we get to the conclusions. So one of the conclusions that phase delays stem from intracycle interference of the classical trajectory. The second one is that there's a change of behavior as a function of the laser intensity, whereas for moderate and intense probe fields, high harmonics and sidebands are in phase. For lower fields, they are in opposition in phase, as we all know from the first order perturbative rabbit theory. Then the going to the omega to omega particular description, we need not only a phase delay, but a set of phase delay. The first one corresponding to the phase delay that we all know, but we have a whole set of phase delay, infinite, with infinite number of elements. And the last of the important conclusions is that there are discrepancies between the TDSC results and the strong field approximation results, even at the highest calculated energies. So let me mention the collaborators. This work was performed by one PhD student, Matías Ochello, from my home institute, Sebastián López from the Universidad Nacional de Salta in the north of Argentina, Renata de la Pica and Ana Alicia Gramajo from Bariloche in the Patagonia, the south of Argentina, and Joachim Rudolph and Stefan Donza from the Vienna University of Technology in Austria. I already mentioned the experimentalists, Mark Rakin and Ole Kornilov from the Max Born Institute in Germany. So other topic, we don't have more time, but let me say that other topics that we are covering are non-dipole effects in laser-assisted photoionization, where the energy changes. There are some corrections given by non-dipole effects. And this is in collaboration with Sebastián, Renata, Juan Randazzo from Bariloche, Argentina, and also Marcelo Chapina from Guangdong Technion in China. And you observe these kind of things that the energy now is not at a certain energy, but it depends on the angle of emission and other stuff that I will not discuss. You can see those studies in these papers, and we are keeping on working on this. So this is the group in IAFE, which is called Quantum Dynamics in Matter Group. And these are the researchers and fellows, students and PhD students and postdoctoral fellows there. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for the attention.
So thank you so much for joining. And for those who are watching on YouTube, take good care of yourselves. See you in 2 weeks and have a great weekend.